All right, we might make a start. Thanks everyone for joining us for our February Marine Robotics reading group. And I'm so excited for this one today. So we're joined by Sergei Nozdrenkov. I'm sorry if I say that wrong, but he's the founder of Wildflow. So I'm personally super excited to hear what he has to say. He's making beautiful 3D scene reconstructions of coral reefs. He's previously spent many years at Google. He's worked as part of the Alphabet's Moonshot Factory. So can we all please make Sergei feel really welcome?
Thank you so much, Scarlett, and thank you, everyone. It's a big honor to be here.
All right, so if you want to take us away, we'll have a bit of time for questions at the end. So anyone online, feel free to put questions in the chat as we go, or save them to the end, whatever works. And we should have about an hour in the session, so hopefully leaving some time at the end for questions as well. Fantastic.
Sounds good. Okay. Let's go. Okay, so where do we start? Imagine you were traveling to some remote location, remote country, and then you got into the jail, unfortunately, and you are given only one phone call to make. Who would you call? So I guess you would call your friend, and you need to trust this person. This friend needs to care about you genuinely. They need to be smart because it's like a difficult task. And this friend also shouldn't be just like couch smart. So they shouldn't be lying on the sofa and thinking like, oh, how do I help him in the analysis paralysis? They need to be real doers. So they need to be able to plan and execute so that they could help you. We typically call this high agency, and we all value high agency friends, high agency people, maybe high agency systems. Coral reefs don't have a friend like that, unfortunately. So this talk will be more about like how do we build high agency systems for the planetary health, because we need it. So I'll start with how do we get there. So like 10 years ago, I started working at Google Maps, teaching satellite data. Then I was in ads, working on the monetization, then joined Moonshot Factory. Moonshot Factory doing lots of kind of crazy things like hot air balloons, giving internet or self-driving cars or exoskeletons. And my project was about the bees. So we were listening for bees buzzing using IoT devices. And then we use machine learning to try classify diseases of the bees. Are there any like ants in the colony, or like where do you place beehives for better pollination? That's how I first kind of got into the field of biodiversity or like ecology. And that's super fascinating. Then we kind of realized that pest management is a super big problem, because use of pesticides is one of the biggest drivers of biodiversity decline in the world of insects. And we need to focus on that if we want to tackle the biodiversity crisis of insects. And then in parallel, I did a lot of diving, like scuba diving. I don't really know how to swim. I'm a bad swimmer, so I sink quite well. So I decided to leverage my strength and learn free diving. And over time, we opened up a club in the UK, a lot of free divers. Then 3 years ago, I left Google and kind of decided to become homeless or create a startup in the ocean biodiversity. So I wanted to share with you my like general assumption stack, because I think this could be helpful to figure out, let's say, like what to focus on working, or like how to even think about biodiversity and so on. And it might be like different from what typically ecologists think. So I don't know, let's give it a go. So in the past, when we worked on pest management, we typically measured, with different sensors where insects are. So for example, we use like pheromone traps, acoustic traps, sticky traps, linear irrigation systems with cameras. then we try to pull all this data together into some sort of like a database and focus on predicting, let's say, modeling population dynamics, like predicting when the outbreak of pest is going to happen. And then once we know when it's going to happen, then you could take action. So, for example, you could do some targeted spraying. So instead of spraying the whole field based on the calendar, you could do it a few days earlier before the outbreak. And this way you are not going to kill so many like good insects, for example, or you don't spray toxic chemicals, which, I don't know, cause cancer and so on. But there is way more different other interventions or like actions in the real world we could do. So for example, one is using, it's called like mating disruption. So for example, Colorado potato beetle female lays eggs somewhere, and then male try to find them and fertilize, and they find them via smell. It's called pheromones or semiochemical signaling molecules. So you could, in theory, figure out which molecule it is using the same process as drug discovery in pharma, and then maybe like synthesize it and spray it in the field, so they would be confused, not knowing where the actual eggs and where is just the smell. So this way you could disrupt it, and this way you don't have to use toxic chemicals at all, because you only like kind of spray the smell, population would decline, and you don't like kill anyone. There is many other interventions. Could be like biocontrol, for example, when you increase amount of predator species, and so on. And this is actively used also in coral reefs. So, for example, you could like repel crown of thorns starfish with similar molecules and so on. But the main maybe like thing to notice is we typically measure things, then we try to analyze and, I don't know, decide what to do, and then we take action. Then I worked some time with marine protected areas, and typically they had like quite similar data flow. So they take data, for example, from BROVs, then maybe from acoustic tags or satellite tags, or something else. Then they try to find where the cluster of the most important fish, like model ecological niche modeling, and then they take action or like set of actions, for example, create marine protected area or enforce it. So it's like the same thing. And the more I was exploring, I don't know, ecology, the more I was noticing the same pattern everywhere. And obviously, I mean, you know it better than I do. So it's typical kind of control theory, or like cybernetic loop and perception, prediction, and control. And it's everywhere. So for example, in self-driving cars or in our nervous system, so you touch something hot, you kind of measure, then you, I don't know, figure out, oh, it's hot. And then you decided to take action, like remove your hand from the stove or something like that. So it happens like very often, and in many places. So you all probably heard this famous story about wolves in Yellowstone, about landscape of fear. So long story short is like in 1990s, like scientists reintroduced back, I don't know, a few hundred wolves into the Yellowstone, and the ecosystem got back into the balance, and rivers became full of water, and they were dry for over 70 years because the ecosystem was out of balance when the wolves were completely hunted down. So that's like example of modeling like predator-prey dynamics or trophic cascade. And the action is fairly simple, just reintroduce, I don't know, some wolves. Or last year we were traveling with folks to the East Java, and I was talking to some local people in Banyuwangi, and I was wondering why there is some like massive like moat or a ditch close to the place where we dive in with coral reefs. And it turns out that in 2014, lots of people were dying from dengue, and dengue was like a very big problem there because of a lot of mosquitoes. And there was one particular lake, not the one on the picture, it had a lot of mosquitoes there, so they kind of made this ditch, connected it to the ocean, so the water became salty, so there was no mosquitoes, and dengue kind of disappeared to a certain degree. I'm not saying that's the best intervention we could do, but that's an intervention. So let's kind of look more closely into like what's happening in the measurement, in the modeling, and in the action space if we were to build a startup in the space or build some sort of technology and so on. So on the measurement side, it seems like we're having more and more data, and right now, like in 2018, we had more ocean data than in the entire previous centuries. There's like a famous Nature paper that talks about this. And if you kind of doing sensors, I wouldn't say that we have like enough data, but the amount is like growing, it's like skyrocketing. And the biggest problem for everyone who's doing sensors or like data collecting companies is who do you sell the data? So, or who needs your data? So for example, NOAA at the Oceans Decade conference was telling like, hey, how do we justify data collection? Because it's so expensive, and what's going to be happening downstream? Or typically, majority of robotics companies, their main customer is either defense or maybe oil and gas or some sort of infrastructure. And for the biosphere, it's mainly carbon, and a tiny percent is already actual biodiversity. So I'm thinking like, how do we fix it? So for people who's measuring biodiversity, the biggest bottleneck is like, who do you sell down the road so that it's kind of the whole thing is functioning. Then in the middle, there is like another problem which I call like data fragmentation. So again, we have tsunami of data, but it's all in different formats, different organizations, and it's really hard to kind of find it and use it. And I've heard so many stories from other colleagues. So for example, one group collected eDNA in Kenya, and then they were talking at the conference. They were like, oh, we collected it like a month ago in exactly the same place. And if they only knew that the other group collected, they would just exchange the data and maybe like split the costs, because right now it's like we're kind of flying blind there. So now if you look at the action space, like where people deploying wolves or doing other interventions, it's basically we're also flying blind, and everyone is talking like, what do? We don't really know what localized interventions we could do, because and they all say we need the data. So it's a paradox. We have a lot of data, but at the same time, everyone says we need the data. What they mean by that, I think they mean like we need actual decisions on like what to do in this place. So I would argue that in whole this system, the bottleneck is somewhere in the middle. So it's after we measurement, there is not enough maybe of the data layer and not enough of the capacity to process this data and make some sort of decisions on what needs to be happening down the stream so that we could protect and restore nature quicker. For the data layer, there could be multiple solutions. It could be like data platforms. It could be federated data networks like in healthcare. It could be like consortiums. So sometimes a few companies or organizations put the data together and it benefits everyone. So there's multiple solutions. And for the modeling, well, that's typically, I guess, AI models are for that. So if we're talking about this agentic loop, so we need to accelerate it, first of all. So marine protected areas, it takes, for example, like 5 years to create one. And even if you have all the data you need, it typically takes a few years just to analyze the data. And I'm like, why it can't be in like 1 hour or 1 minute. Could it be just like real-time system where people, I don't know, drop in the data, connecting all the data sources, and then as a conservationist, you just go to the government and just like iterate with them and try to propose new ideas instead of sitting and like crunching the data. And then the second one is we need to kind of increase the bandwidth. What do I mean by that? So typically in biodiversity, people use only like a few kind of simple formats. So one of them is like time series geospatial biodiversity data, which typically is like where, twice where, when, where, and who, and how many. So for example, in this location, in this moment in time, we saw 2 sharks, and this was the size of the shark. And that's typical, like GBIF, IBAT, and like many other databases have this format, and it's great, but I think it's quite limiting. So for our system, like we need to do better. So for example, on the right image, you see like a diver with a fish. And there is some research which says that proximity of certain species of fish to the diver is actually a very important factor of how much people are harassing the fish in the ecosystem. And we're like completely losing that. So the takeaway is we're losing a lot of information from the raw sensor data in the downstream analysis. So for example, that was like one example. Another example is maybe you see a shark on the underwater video camera, but you didn't notice that, for example, it had some like tissue loss, or it was like injured, or it had like funky, I don't know, like behavior or something else. So maybe we need, I don't know, like instead of having only like latitude, longitude, time, and a few more parameters, maybe we want to have like a shared, I don't know, embeddings vector with, I don't know, 1,000 parameters, which would encode all the stuff like latitude, longitude, and so on, along with parameters like, oh, this is those species, this is size, this is potential diseases, and so on. And maybe we could have this shared embedding vector across multiple modalities like, I don't know, acoustics, DNA, and so on. So effectively, yeah, we need to increase the bandwidth of information from sensors to actions. So this one is the same thing. I just wanted to show this. So usually you can also like draw it as a pie kind of, or stack of things. So at the bottom could be sensing solutions, then like maybe some sort of like data layer or memory, then your brain, which makes kind of decisions, extracts some insights, and then decisions, and then application layer or action space where people doing something. And why I'm showing this, because this could be useful for you to place different organizations or like companies where they are. So let's say flying fish technology, they're great. So they have sensing solutions. They attach a glider behind the boat and can measure lots of different things. They have a little bit of a data layer, so they store their own data. For example, they do extract some of the AI insights, and I don't think they do any like applications, but they work with others who do them, for example, restoring the reefs. Or similar, maybe sail drones. So they definitely have like a fleet of their sail drones. Then they have a data layer, so they figured out that it's important and data has lots of properties and so on. And then they have like some of the AI insights which could be used for different things. If you look at, again, let's say nature metrics, they could be only eDNA, let's say, sensors. Then they have like some sort of data layer, but they create consortiums. They put data together with other modality providers to exchange the data and so on. Then let's say Coral Vita, they're restoring coral reefs. They're primarily in the application layer. And obviously they have some of the AI insights. They have Coral Brain system, and they have their data, and they probably either I don't know, finding someone to measure things, or like they measure it themselves. So it's kind of could be vertical integration. So just as a exercise because that's typically helpful. So where do we want to go? So I think we want to create, or maybe we already have this agent or like digital nervous system for the planet, which measures what's happening. So imagine all the sensors measuring biosphere connected to our actions, what we do to like restore and protect nature. And in the middle, we have, let's say, some data layer and maybe some models or ability to process the data and make sense of it. So that's kind of what we need. We have it already, but it's not really kind of smart agent yet. So at the moment, it's like very slow and yeah, like we need, there is a room for improvement, definitely. Also, agents typically have goals. So for example, Waymo drives you to the destination. So what should be the goal for our agent? Well, I think like a big goal could be, how do we become the first generation that leaves nature behind better than we found it? So at the moment, nature gives us a lot. Some estimates are like $140 trillion in ecosystem services. That's kind of more than GDP, but the entire GDP, $125 trillion, is like heavily dependent on nature. So at the moment, nobody seriously trying to optimize ecosystem services. But just imagine if we were to optimize our decisions by just like 1%, that would be over $1 trillion value globally. And at the moment, we're like losing nature. We lost 73% of wildlife in the past 50 years. So I guess that could be a good goal to have. So we need to kind of establish a symbiotic relationship with nature or become the first sustainable generation. So the nice, cool goal, how do we get there? So I guess first we need to know what to do, and then we need to do what needs to be done, kind of plan and execute and do this in the loop. We need to understand nature and kind of align human activities with our understanding of nature. In other words, we need to model the biosphere and drive the action. So quickly, like I'm gonna mainly talk about modeling the biosphere, but let me noodle a little bit on the action space. So typically when people say, okay, even if you have, let's say, a crystal ball for nature, how do you, I don't know, convince people to do anything? Because that's really hard. And they're right. Like if we tell everyone, let's say, let's reduce carbon, let's remove plastic, let's, I don't know, work towards smaller ozone kind of layer holes. That's really hard. All of that is a tragedy of the commons, but the action space is actually, it has multiple properties. So first one is it could be like hard to control those actions, or it could be easy to control. So let's say like famous rabbits in Australia, that was hard to control. Could be low value or could be high value of those actions, so like perceived value. And actions could be global, like plastic, carbon, and others, or it could be localized, like let's deploy the wolves. And the beauty of localized actions that they affect kind of a concrete kind of a set of actors, so that it's kind of easier. So for example, if you go to the mayor of, I don't know, like some city and say like, do you want to have fresh water in the river? How much would you pay? Which I only need to deploy, I don't know, 3 wolves here. Of course, people would pay. So anyway, so the main focus is how do we create this kind of crystal ball for nature. So the biggest problem is nature is incredibly complex. It's been evolving for billions of years, and we don't really know how it works. So oceans still like a black box, and we have tsunami of data. We're losing nature. People are, I don't know, wasting money because they don't know where to put them. And in general, poor understanding of nature leads to poor decisions, which eventually harm nature. So how do we kind of make sense of all the data to understand nature and then make better ecosystem decisions. So I think it's inevitable that one day we will comprehensively model the entire biosphere because of these three reasons. Because we're losing it, we're losing nature, the amount of data is skyrocketing, and AI and tech is improving. So think like when the internet appeared, we had a whole bunch of websites, people were publishing them. So search engines were destined to appear because you need to make sense of all the data. You need to make use of the data. You need to maybe search it. But now it's less about search. It's about ecosystem decisions effectively. So I think good news, maybe AI and tech could help. So maybe multimodal foundation models could help. So what if we were to train such models? Where would we start? So we thought, let's focus on coral reefs because let's say you want to train ChatGPT, you take all the text in the world, you compress it, and here you go, it speaks Japanese, for example. But if you had only 3 sentences copied like trillions of times, and then you tried to train the model, it's not going to speak Japanese because it's a poor data. So if I were to start kind of in agriculture, the problem there is you have a few crops, few pests, so it's not enough ecosystem interactions to model. So we need like something more diverse with a lot of data. So that's turned out to be coral reefs, because all our coral reefs in the world are kind of size of New Zealand, yet they support over a quarter of marine life, and like 500 million people directly rely on their ecosystem services. So that's a good place to start. And all ecosystems are kind of still poorly monitored, but this one is actually like not too bad compared to others in terms of data. So, okay, what's next? Then let's probably create some sort of like digital twin, quote unquote, of coral reef ecosystem. We could be taking multimodal data, let's say 3D, DNA, remote sensing, acoustics, video, everything, and then output some decisions on like what needs to be done, and also model like what's happening in the ecosystem, what pressures or kind of human impact on the ecosystem, and what does it give us in terms of ecosystem services. So how do we get there? So, well, I guess the best would be to, so I don't know, but I was trying to brute force through different modalities, because the biggest problem is kind of how do we solve data fragmentation for coral reefs? So how do we have enough data to train like massive models which could help make quality decisions about what to do? And so how do we put together the data? So I was thinking, I can't do all modalities at once. I could choose maybe one. So I was brute forcing, let me do maybe geospatial. Well, there is Allen Coral Atlas, and you don't really see coral reefs well from space to make quality decisions. Then we could do Shazam for coral reefs, but that's tricky as well to be the first thing. We could do maybe YouTube for coral reefs or Twitch for coral reefs, where we have video modality. That's actually good. We could do eDNA for corals, but coral reefs is like such a niche, small market. I mean, it's still pretty hard. So I came across of 3D modality, and I realized, oh, actually, that seems to be the best choice, because the amount of information which we get from the data is really, really big. So it's high signal to noise ratio, and people kind of understand it, and relatively easy to collect. The biggest problem is like analyzing it. And I was like, oh, great, that's a software problem. So I don't need to convince people that it's good, or don't need to do kind of hardware and so on. So that's effectively kind of the high-level plan, like reverse engineering. How do we get to the first sustainable generation? So first model biosphere, then model all the coral reefs, and then now is a kind of 3D street view for coral reefs. So, sorry. how does it work? So at the moment, you could say take pictures or swim around the reef, and we create you 3D model, then we analyze it, and then we drive some sort of action in the real world. So if you were to ask what could you even do with the coral reef, I really like this paper from Professor Forrest Rover and Jason Baer. It has a lot of different categories of interventions. For example, you could do herbivore stalking, you could do sexual propagation, assisted adaptation, I don't know, cryptobenthic translocation, artificial reefs, which everyone knows, and many, many other things. So apparently action space is like super big. And I haven't seen like one system where people are focusing on like driving those actions like really systematically. So I think that's a good opportunity. And just, I don't know, like want to be humble for a second, because it's really, really hard to restore the reefs. Let's say you are out planting, and you don't really care about like fancy technology or anything. You just want to know whether it works or it doesn't work. And that's a big thing. So in terms of 3D data, the plan was, okay, let's master 3D modality first. So there is lots of people who have the data. How do we, I don't know, like even visualize it? So obviously there is amazing tools like Sketchfab, Cesium, or like others. But the problem is you have like polygonal mesh, and you don't really see properly corals to in high fidelity, or you need like too many polygons, so it's like crazy high in terms of how much space does it take. So we decided to focus like a year and a half ago on 3D Gaussian plotting, just as a tool to visualize 3D models in the browser, so that it's like easier to share. Like think like imagine if ecologists had kind of Google Doc for like you could leave the comments or share a link to your model and ask others what is that, I don't know, and so on. Because right now, how do you even like exchange the data? So that's kind of crazy. So this is one of the first data sets. So this is like massive one of the world's largest coral reef restoration projects in Indonesia. It's called the Hope Reef, restored by Shiba Mars. So I'll show you probably like, I guess, the demo from like a year ago. So this one is loading. I'll show you more new demos, but that was one of the first reefs. So it's 20 by 50 meters mapped with a GoPro, and you could click on like 5 by 5 meter patches and see it in kind of slightly higher resolution. So obviously it's far away from being perfect, but you could get some sort of like meaningful information from what you see. Then okay, like since the whole goal is why we're in the coral reefs is like, how do we solve data fragmentation problems? So we have two major data streams. One of them is kind of citizen scientists or small restoration efforts who need help. And the second one is large organizations. We try to be a glue between big organizations who have a lot of data, but they're struggling, for example, with visualizing or exchanging this and so on. So for the first group, we kind of created a protocol which explains how to swim with any, I don't know, cheap cameras like GoPros or DJI Osmo, or maybe someone has DSLR around the reef, so that we could turn it into the 3D model. And this has been kind of helpful. For example, this guy's Conflict Islands Conservation Initiative, they amazing team, so they send lots of data, and there is they're restoring multiple reefs, and some of them are quite far, so it's important for them to I don't know, like capture it and see what's happening with the reef and so on. So in general, we focus in right now we provide this kind of 3 values. So like one is optimizing operations. So for example, like whatever you're doing, you want to be sure that you're doing the right thing and it's working, and maybe you want to kind of correct it later. So let's say if you're out planting, you want to know whether it's working or not. How does the whole reef change? Second one is kind of marketing engagement side of things, because people like the models and they could share and it could help them, I don't know, raise more money for their restoration project. And the third one is transparency or third-party validation. That's a big thing. When I started working on coral reefs, I realized that found a paper by Trias and Rinda. I don't know. So they basically say that in Indonesia, in 84% of coral reef restoration, people like never come back to monitor the reefs at all, and that's crazy to me. So how do we even, I don't know what to do if we don't monitor? Another thing is we could learn a lot from satellite data. So I really like, let's say, Google Earth Engine, where you could take lots of geospatial data sets and run analytics across all of them. But in 3D, it doesn't like really work like that at the moment. So one, I don't know, square meter of 3D photogrammetry data is way heavier per than I don't know, satellite data per 1 square meter. Yet everyone is still processing the data locally. There is no like one good cloud where you could run analytics on top of all the data. So imagine you have like thousands or tens of thousands of reefs, and you run, let's say, how diseases propagate across those reefs, or how I don't know, like how restoration works, and so on. Right now, it's all kind of pen and paper in a way, or like I don't know, very simplified methods which don't provide like enough, I think, information. I'll show you a few more demos. And I'll try to accelerate. It seems too slow. So that's from another partners in Maldives. They're restoring the reefs called Saniva. Okay, sometimes the data could be low visibility. It still turns out to be okay. So this is another data set. So Hope Reef, I think I showed a little bit. So we do support orthomosaics, like 2D maps from the coral reefs. And in general, like what does 3D coral reefs data give us? Well, beyond looking nice, I think, so like it could give us structural complexity, then growth rate, benthic cover, like species ID, maybe community composition, and early warning signals. You could try doing like segmentation, and on images on 2D is pretty hard, but if you have 3D, it is effectively images from all the sides, so you could run on all of them and then project it into the 3D model, so that's kind of more signal. And in general, let's say you could do virtual field work and kind of come back and explore the data, or if somebody left the team, like all the knowledge typically lost, but you capture the proper snapshot. And so in general, like what works, what doesn't work, make quality decisions, drive transparency, and hopefully money flow. I think right now the biggest bottleneck for the money is like nobody wants to give the data because give the money because like you don't really know if it's gonna work or not. If it did work, that would be way easier. Or if we knew this one does work. So we do like publish quite some data. So like last year we published 13 coral reef sites. So it's under Creative Commons license. Some people already use it for certain projects. For example, some use for like Scubaverse, for example. There is a cool project using it for underwater games. there is another project like Santa Cruz University, for example, using it for VR things for engagement sites. So that's pretty cool. Recently, Josh, for example, from Bristol University did a really cool. So this is like semantics plotting. I want everyone like kind of have a look. So he basically ran Dino v3 on all the images and projected them into these plots. And this one you could see like PCA basically analysis. So I think this could be really useful down the road for like 3D semantic segmentation, like maybe semantic search, and hopefully for, I don't know, species classification. Maybe not necessarily with Dino v3 model, but I think we could just train on all the data a similar model with the same backbone as Dino v3. There is other things which you could model, like fuse different modalities, so that could be helpful. And in general, like what do we want to model about coral reefs or about nature? I think we want to understand what's happening within the ecosystem, so like processes. So for example, population dynamics, predator-prey dynamics, like phenology, for example, when coral reefs are spawning, and things like that. We want to model what nature gives us in terms of like values or ecosystem services. Why this is important? Because that's effectively for our agent, where do we want to drive it? And like one of the targets could be ecosystem services valuation. So I guess we want to drive nature to keep it healthy, and we want like a healthy nature is valuable nature, so we want to drive the value there. And I think that would be the easiest way to kind of plug it into the capitalism, so that we kind of not doing extractive zero-sum game, but rather like growing shared economy. So a human impact, so that's effectively how we affect coral reefs through maybe interventions or threats. And at the moment, the only thing we have, I mean, we by Wildflow, we have perception kind of models. We're like trying to understand what's on the 3D data. So like we're pretty low agency in that regard, but yeah, we're getting there. So this is roughly a very simplified version of our 3D pipeline. So the actual version looks like that, and we can go through that like later. But yeah, we take the footage, create tie points, or like stitch it all together like regular SFM. I tried to force Nano Banana to turn camera frustums in the right direction, and I tried like 30 times and it didn't do a thing, so sorry. But then from that we do some like referencing, scaling of the models, doing co-registration right now, then turn it into these plots, and we're also doing like color correction. From there we maybe extract like DEMs. Like from the analytics, we take rugosity and like similar structural complexity things. We also create orthomosaics. So that's pretty much it at the moment, plus like, I don't know, a few of the manual analytics. So what I shared is more or less automated, and the rest is like that. We have some tools, like, for example, you could compare orthomosaics in the browser, so you don't need to install I don't know, like awesome tools like TagLab. They're like really cool, but you need to install, and sometimes you need maybe CUDA or like, I don't know, Conda and other things. Then we do have color correction algorithms. I could talk more about like how we want to improve them, but right now it's basically we try to normalize the images by using like gray world theory, and then like apply a few filters across like all the images. But let's say down the road we want to maybe train, I don't know, some like multi-layer perceptron or some sort of like implicit color field, and fine tune a few images and then shift it and then project it to the plots. We could discuss that. another thing is, so this one is, we finally can visualize multiple splats in the browser. So in the past, we could do maybe 3-5 million splats. Now it's a little bit better. So this one is data from Constance University by the coral reef in Raven in Australia. So navigation is pretty terrible, but this reef had like 120 million splats. So we're using progressively loading basically splats using Play Canvas. They created new LOD support. So now you could like rotate, see coral reefs from different sides. Sorry if it's like lagging a little bit, it's probably Zoom. And then you could like click anywhere you want. So for example, oh, this one pink is interesting. And then you see images, like thumbnails of the photos. And then also you see frustums. So you could click on any of the, let's say, frustum and see that specific point that was selected. So for example, this one. And you could see it on different pictures. Then, we have a 2D view, so similar to, let's say, Google Maps. You could have the same point, and if you click anywhere on the 2D orthomosaic, you still see camera frustums. So you could inspect which images kind of capture this point. So like down the road, this will be kind of 3 different views into the same data, so that you can either inspect like 3D model, or you could inspect actual ground truth, or inspect orthomosaic, whatever kind of is necessary. And that's a foundation for future, let's say, semantic segmentation. So let's say you could segment it in ortho, and it will be automatically propagated to 3D and to images. Then you could correct it a little bit on the image, and then it's propagated everywhere. So I think this should give us more information, and we can train models easier, because the same point you could see from different sides, and also in different moments in time. So in total, we got data from over 20 organizations at the moment, and we have a few hundred surveys plots from the world. Not so much, but I think it's already a good starting point to train nice models. So that's where we're starting. So I think just to summarize, I think kind of in humanity, like everyone means well, but as a collective, we quite often doing terrible things. Could be the wars or destroying the planet. So I think the question is like, how do we coordinate everyone to collaborate and protect the planet? And I think we only can do this together. So yeah, that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sergei. That was fantastic. We might start off with the room in terms of questions, and then we'll go to online. So everyone online, have a think about your questions and put them in the chat. But starting in the room, do we have any questions? I've turned on that microphone, so he should be able to hear you.
So you talked about color correcting your Gaussian splats. And I was just wondering, in terms of being able to detect anomalies when you're looking at this information and analyzing this information, is that not counterproductive to be trying to normalize based on the contents of the image and then estimate what it should be, when in fact you're looking for things that it shouldn't be? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. I think what we currently have is definitely not productive. So it's just let's make the model kind of look nice. So like, hey, we could do color correction. But in general, I think color correction is a like big rabbit hole, and it's not fully clear how to approach it kind of like well. So from one side is like getting to the true scientific color is really, really, really hard. Like I guess the best way, if you can put maybe multiple markers on the coral reef itself, like color palettes, and then this would help you to, I don't know, figure out the like true color of the reef. But without that, it's tricky. So what I was thinking, so the first step was like, okay, let's try if we can actually do color correction and make it kind of easier to inspect, because usually it's like very like if you look at the photos, like you don't see enough details. So this way we kind of stretched it a little bit, so you could see, I don't know, oh, this is one colony, this is the other colony. So but it's not like scientifically correct, let's call it this way. So the next step is, let's say you have a lot of repeated surveys, and maybe like they could be even done maybe in multiple different moments in time. So for people who care about color correction, they typically put color palettes onto the reef, and that's great. So what we want to keep is we want, even though it was maybe taken in different moments in time, let's say the sand, it should remain the same color. It shouldn't be like jumping if you, I don't know, change it over time, or yeah, like find the anomalies. So the best method I kind of find right now is maybe let's try to, on the first survey plot, like let's call it an anchor, we could train some sort of like color field. Let's say take MLP, like a very dense one, which takes, let's say, XYZ and outputs RGB, and maybe some positional encoders, and you would like kind of understand where different colors are and like how it's distributed. And then you could go to take a few images, for example, those which have color palettes, and then fine tune, like chop the last layer and fine tune on those, like, I don't know, 10 images. And this should shift the entire color field into the new kind of normalize it. So that this way we don't do it by the photo, but rather like everything all together. So it should like smoothly distribute. So that's the best approach I kind of came up with. But I think that's also like very far from being good. So I know you guys brilliant, and if you have any ideas, that would be super helpful on like how we could do it better.
Awesome. Any more questions in the room? Emilio?
Yes, I was very curious also about the business side of a thing. Like, who is like the typical customer for Wildflow, and like they give you some data, and then the output from you is the 3D model that then they use to do some analysis?
Mm-hmm. So typically, we look like we need people with data, and we need the people with money. So data is like everyone. So we cast the wide net because the whole goal is like, let's put together the data to train the AI. Money side is typically large scale restoration efforts who we add them 3 value propositions at the moment. So like the first one is like help them optimize their operations so that they're more effective. So let's say they put a few million budget, then they want to make sure that it's doing the thing that they wanted to do. Let's say if you're restoring, where do you place, I don't know, reef stars, or how do you, like, where do you put like out plants, or whatever activities could that be? So that's the first one. Second is like marketing. So we have some clients who want to showcase their reefs to the world for that reason. So I think that's kind of low-hanging fruit. And the third one is transparency. So, or like third-party validation. So let's say, like you restored the reefs, but you're like very big company, and like nobody trusts that you actually did. And so everyone is like, you guys are greenwashing. So like people want to like differentiate from that. And I'm thinking like, hey, but we could show actual proof. So let's say you could capture the reef, let's say now, then every, I don't know, 3 months. And then kind of we keep it open source, open data, so anyone could go and like verify it. So that's kind of 3 value propositions at the moment. It's maybe not the best, but it's a starting point. I think down the road, when we like grow coral reef restoration market, which is like pretty small, maybe we'll go into like insurance, for example. So let's say knowing whether you have a hotel, let's say it could be valuable to know whether in, let's say, 5 years there would be a coral reef here or not. That could be one. Or let's say you're building a hotel, so like coastal infrastructure could be another market. So you're building a hotel and some rubbish ended up in the water, and that kind of, as a chain of events, destroyed the reef. And you don't have the tourists anymore because because there is no reef effectively. So what we could like hope in long term is to kind of go to the guys and say like, hey, you can pay, I don't know, 10 grand to remove the rubbish, or you will pay, I don't know, 10 million because you want gonna have tourists. And they're like, oh wow, if it actually works, then it's great. But to get to the point where you could, I don't know, charge money for that, you need to have a lot of data effectively. So that's where we're going.
Yeah, thank you so much.
We probably have time for one final very quick question. Is there anyone else? Serena?
Hello, thank you for your talk. It was really interesting. I have a question about splatting, 3D Gaussian splatting. If you are doing analysis on like a species level, is there a risk that like the splatting process and like the hallucinations or anything can mislead you in that kind of way?
Yeah, that's a really important question. So the short answer is no, we don't use splats for analysis at all. So like when I started working on the 3D Gaussian splatting, like lots of people were like very skeptical. They see it like, oh, there is a traditional photogrammetry and there is a 3D Gaussian splatting. This is like better or like, I don't know, worse or whatever, like another beast in the town. And I'm like, no, that's like not how we look at this at all. So like for the splats, requirements are like relatively low. The only reason we have them is for the people to see kind of the reef from different sides, to have this experience of looking at that. But we still store raw images, camera poses, like point clouds, everything like along the side, so that whenever we do analysis, we would do it on the raw data. There is no reason to do it on the splats. Obviously, there is some research in terms of like, hey, maybe splats actually could be valuable for some of the analysis. But I think, yeah, it's not a problem. Like think of any service, let's say YouTube, right? So you go to YouTube and you see the video, you scroll it and like, wow, nice customer experience. Like, I don't know, you see everything, but what's under the hood? So like under the hood, you have, let's say, videos in like 4K, 180p, in like different formats. Then you have audio like separately, maybe audio in different languages. Then you have, I don't know, comments, you have transcriptions and so on. And then whenever you scroll, maybe it doesn't actually store the whole video, but like could store it as chunks. So it like fetches the right chunk and show it to you. So what I want is I want for people to have a like smooth product where ecologists, like they don't even know, they come to portal, some sort of like digital twin of a coral reef, where they see like different views into reality, into the real coral reef. Could be photos, could be 3D, could be whatever. But then when we run analytics, it will be run on whatever is best for this type of analytics. So for example, if you're modeling, I don't know, let's say bleaching, then we would take raw images and maybe we'll do color correction, but only when, let's say, color palettes are available. So that could be like one. But if we were to model, let's say, fluid dynamics, sure, we will take, let's say, mesh or digital elevation model, or if we are modeling, let's say, the sun in a certain position, so we want to know like how, I don't know, like which parts of the colonies are like there is shadows or no. So for that, we will use other types of data. So that's totally fine as long as it kind of provides nice experience.
Thanks so much, Sergei. We have to leave it there because we have to get out of this room. But thank you so much for joining, and can we thank you one more time?
Thank you so much, everyone.